Have you ever wondered what happened to the soldier who pierced Jesus' side? Today, we will unravel one of history's darkest mysteries, a journey fraught with guilt, disturbing visions, and inexplicable events that to this day defy understanding. Before we dive into this powerful narrative, leave a like. This helps us bring more content like this, and, believe me, you won't want to miss any details of this story. Every second of this video can change your perspective and make you reflect on the true weight of guilt. So, stick with me until the end and get ready for a surprising revelation. The full moon illuminated the cold night, bathing the land in its pale, spectral light. The soldier, whose name no one remembered, walked through the deserted streets of Jerusalem, feeling the unbearable weight on his shoulders. Since the day of the crucifixion, something inside him had changed profoundly. It wasn't just a common act, it wasn't just any execution. It had pierced the side of Jesus, the man many said was the Son of God. The spear passed through Christ's body, and with it, it seemed as if something inside the soldier had been destroyed. Now, this weight grew with every step he took. The soldier tried, in vain, to shake off the memories of that day. The suffocated scream, the blood that gushed, the serene and penetrating gaze of Jesus in his last moments. These details haunted him, as if they were burned into his mind with a hot iron. Every time he closed his eyes, the moment of piercing returned, over and over again. He couldn't understand why it tormented him so much. It was just another day at work for him. But then, something started to change. The first vision came during a silent night, when the soldier was trying to sleep. He woke up with a start, feeling a strange presence in his room. An icy wind ran through the room, and before him, a nebulous figure appeared, without a defined shape, but with a look that seemed to pierce his soul. The vision did not say a word, but the soldier felt that a silent message had been conveyed. His act would not go unnoticed. The cold in his body intensified, and he knew he was beginning a journey of no return. The days that followed were filled with increasing anguish. The soldier could no longer find peace. Every step he took through the streets of Jerusalem made him feel as if he were being watched. The people around him spoke normally, but he heard murmurs, whispers that echoed everywhere. In his lonely hours, he began to question, was he responsible for the death of a god? Had he sealed his own fate the moment his spear penetrated Christ's side? One night, he wandered around the city, looking for a moment of peace away from the hustle and bustle. As he approached a forest, the sound of voices began to echo through the trees. They were distant voices, almost inaudible, but they seemed to be calling his name. His heart quickened, but he couldn't resist his curiosity. He advanced toward the sound, and as he got closer, the whisper became clearer. "Why?" said the voices. "Why did you do that?" With each question, the weight in his chest increased. Inside the woods, he found a clearing where a dense fog covered the ground. In the center of the clearing, he saw something that made him freeze. A hooded figure stood, in complete silence. The soldier tried to speak, but his voice broke. When the figure lifted its hood, it revealed a face he would never have imagined seeing again, Jesus himself. Or was it? The face was distorted, not in a physical way, but in a way that defied reality. Guilt crushed the soldier with an unrelenting force. He fell to his knees, trying to apologize, but the words wouldn't come out. The figure stared at him for a few seconds, before disappearing into the mist, as if it had never been there. The soldier remained on the ground, feeling that something far beyond his understanding was at stake. He didn't know if he was losing his sanity or if the world around him had turned into something he would never understand. But one thing was clear, his life would never be the same. As the weeks passed, the soldier's life became a relentless search for answers. He wandered through temples and deserts, seeking to understand what had happened on that fateful day. But the more he searched, the more he seemed to get lost in a maze of guilt and regret. Disturbing dreams haunted him every night, and he woke up in a cold sweat, feeling the presence of something dark around him. He began to question whether there was any redemption for him. With each new vision, the soldier asked himself, what if what he saw was just a projection of his own guilt? Or was it something much deeper, something beyond human understanding? Fate seemed to play with him, offering him bits and pieces of answers, but never enough to ease his torment. And so, he continued, trapped in a spiral of doubt and fear, not knowing if he would ever find the redemption he sought. The soldier found himself in a dark cave, the only place he felt he could escape the visions. But upon entering the cave, he was greeted by a final, inexplicable vision. The cave walls began to glow with strange lights, and ethereal figures danced around him, whispering truths he would never fully understand. And then, everything went dark. The story ended there, with no clear answers, just the eternal mystery of the soldier's fate. The days became indistinguishable for the soldier. The line between reality and delusion began to disappear, as if time itself was abandoning him. In every face on the streets of Jerusalem, he saw the look of Jesus, mute, motionless, but accusing. The voices that were once whispers now screamed his name, echoing off the walls of houses and alleys, accompanying him like a vengeful spirit that would never leave him alone. Even the nights, which previously brought some relief, became an extension of his torment. In one of his most vivid nightmares, he found himself again at the foot of the cross. The sky was dark, starless, and the world around him seemed frozen in time. Jesus, still hanging on the cross, slowly turned his head towards him. Why? The voice was neither accusatory nor angry. It was just a question, but its weight was unbearable. The soldier tried to scream, to justify himself, but his voice didn't come out. Instead, he fell to his knees, tears burning his eyes. The cross, now shrouded in shadows that seemed alive, swallowed the soldier until he woke up, panting in a cold sweat. He began to isolate himself more and more, fearing not only the visions but also the reality that awaited him outside his doors. The world, for him, had become a distorted reflection of his own sins. And then, a thought began to form in his mind. What if he was not just being punished for his act, but destined to suffer for all eternity? What if what he experienced now was just the beginning of eternal torment, a preview of the judgment to come? The weight of guilt took him to places he had never imagined. He sought out priests, mystics, and even sorcerers, seeking any kind of redemption or answer. But no one could relieve him of his burden. "Your sin cannot be erased so easily," said some. "You have touched the divine," warned others. Doubt about his future and his own sanity grew within him like a disease. He no longer knew if what he was experiencing was the result of his disturbed mind or something much larger, something he had no ability to understand. In a last desperate attempt, the soldier decided to return to the site of the crucifixion. He hoped to find some answer there, perhaps a sign that there was still hope. The hill was deserted when he arrived, and the wind whistled between the rocks like a silent lament. He fell to his knees in the exact place where the spear had pierced Jesus' body, and, for the first time in a long time, he wept. They were not just tears of regret, but of pure despair. He cried out to the heavens for forgiveness, for an answer, anything. Silence was his only response. But then, something strange happened. The ground beneath his feet began to shake slightly, and he felt a presence around him, something invisible but undeniably real. The wind intensified, and a feeling of being watched overcame him. He looked around but saw no one. And then, whispers started again, but this time, they weren't coming from outside. They came from inside him. They were incomprehensible words, but they were loaded with a deep meaning that he could not ignore. The soldier began to question whether he was completely losing his mind. But the inexplicable events that followed made him believe that perhaps there were forces beyond his understanding at work. One night, he woke up to find strange marks on his hands, like fresh scars, even though he had not been hurt. The marks resembled the stigmata of crucifixion, but they were on his own body. He felt a mixture of terror and fascination. Could it be a sign? Or would it be another test? Events became more intense. The visions began to haunt him every moment, regardless of whether he was awake or asleep. He saw images of angels and demons, battling for control of his soul, but whenever he tried to intervene or understand, the figures disappeared into mist. His body began to weaken, consumed by a constant anguish that seemed to eat away at his essence. He felt like he was slowly unraveling, as if every part of him was being absorbed by guilt. One night, while wandering through a dark desert, he saw a light in the distance, bright and dazzling. Even though he was exhausted, he felt compelled to follow this light, believing that perhaps he would find his redemption there. But as he got closer, he realized that the light was not coming from something divine, but from a burning flame that did not burn. In the center, a figure awaited him. It was himself, or a distorted version of who he had been. The figure smiled, a smile that didn't bring comfort, but a grim warning. And then, she whispered, "Forgiveness isn't for everyone." The soldier fell to his knees again, this time feeling the weight of utter despair. There was nowhere left to run, and he knew his soul was on the verge of collapse. The soldier fell to his knees again, this time feeling the weight of utter despair. There was nowhere left to run, and he knew his soul was on the verge of collapse. When the figure disappeared, he was left alone in the desert, surrounded by darkness. He wondered if there would ever be an end to his suffering, or if he was destined to live eternally tormented by the guilt and inexplicable forces that surrounded him. A strange but unsettling calm. The wind stopped, the voices fell silent, and time seemed to stop. He knew something was about to happen, something that would change everything. In the sky, stars began to go out, one by one, until only darkness remained. And then, one last vision appeared before his eyes, Jesus, in all his glory, but with an expression he couldn't decipher. And before he could speak or act, the vision disappeared, leaving only emptiness. The soldier stood, paralyzed by uncertainty, as darkness enveloped him. He wondered whether Jesus' appearance was a sign of forgiveness or a reminder of his irredeemable failure. Doubt gnawed at his heart, but the weight of guilt became more and more unbearable. He remembered the words he had heard before about the possibility of a forgiveness that few could achieve. Am I worthy of redemption? The question echoed in his mind as he fought the vertigo of his visions. In his search for answers, he began venturing into the streets of Jerusalem, looking for others who, like him, could understand the pain of guilt. He found a group of people on the margins of society, lost souls who carried similar burdens. Each of them had their stories, each of them a mark of a past that they could not erase. Together, they formed a fragile connection, a brotherhood of shared pain, but even between them, guilt continued to hover like a shadow. Are we condemned to carry this forever? Someone asked, and everyone's response was awkward silence. However, one night, something inexplicable happened while they were gathered in an ancient temple. A brilliant light flooded the space, and the faces of those present turned into expressions of astonishment. The soldier, who had already lost hope, felt a new wave of energy course through his body. He looked around and saw that everyone was involved in a kind of trance, as if an invisible force was connecting them. It was a moment of pure transcendence, where guilt and pain seemed to dissipate, even if temporarily. But the euphoria was short-lived. As soon as the light disappeared, reality returned with all its rawness. The soldier realized that the connection he had felt was not a solution to his suffering, but a temporary illusion. He still had to face his inner demons, which would not be content to disappear so easily. The disturbing visions returned, this time more intense. He saw familiar faces, people who had suffered because of him, and each one seemed to turn into a silent accusation. The soldier's search for redemption became a cycle of hope and despair. He began making pilgrimages to holy sites, where he believed he might find some form of absolution. In each place, a new sight awaited him. An elderly man carrying a cross looked him in the eye and said, "Carrying guilt is a journey, but how you walk it is your choice." Those words were engraved in his mind. "I don't know how to move forward," he confessed, voice shaking. And the man, with a look that mixed compassion and sadness, simply replied, "Maybe it's time to confront your fears." Courage finally emerged within the soldier. He decided he needed to face his past once and for all. He gathered the group of lost souls and took them to the site of the crucifixion. The atmosphere was charged with tension. When they arrived, he felt a mix of fear and determination. "Today, we don't just visit this place. We claim our right to the truth," he declared. And his companions nodded, encouraged by his words. As they approached the cross, the energy in the air changed. The soldier fell to his knees again, but this time it was not out of despair. It was an act of confrontation, of defiance. He cried out to heaven, "If there is justice, if there is forgiveness, let it come to me now." The echo of his voice reverberated off the hill, and the earth seemed to tremble beneath him. The clouds gathered, and a strong wind began to blow, lifting the sand around them. And then, at the height of his declaration, a profound silence fell. The landscape around him seemed to be suspended, as if time itself had stopped. The soldier looked at his friends, who were equally surprised, and realized that a new kind of understanding was forming between them. "We are more than our mistakes. Our stories don't have to end in guilt," he said, and for the first time, he felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if the truth began to emerge, freeing them from the invisible shackles that held them captive. "What will happen now?" asked one of the companions. The soldier smiled slightly, knowing that no matter what lay ahead, they were on this journey together. As they stood, a soft light began to emerge from the horizon, promising a new beginning. However, before they could absorb the magnitude of the moment, the earth shook one last time. The sky opened in an explosion of light, and everyone felt the presence of something much greater. And then, at the height of his declaration, a profound silence fell. The landscape around him seemed to be suspended, as if time itself had stopped. The soldier looked at his friends, who were equally surprised, and realized that a new kind of understanding was forming between them. "We are more than our mistakes. Our stories don't have to end in guilt," he said, and for the first time, he felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if the truth began to emerge, freeing them from the invisible shackles that held them captive. "What will happen now?" asked one of the companions. The soldier smiled slightly, knowing that no matter what lay ahead, they were on this journey together. As they stood, a soft light began to emerge from the horizon, promising a new beginning. However, before they could absorb the magnitude of the moment, the earth shook one last time. The sky opened in an explosion of light, and everyone felt the presence of something much greater. The soldier felt that regardless of what lay ahead, the real battle was not just against guilt, but the search for understanding and connection. Thus, the future remained shrouded in mystery, and what would come next, no one knew. "The journey doesn't end here," he reflected. "In fact, it's just beginning."